right, so I am going to introduce our speaker this morning, Brian Grasso. Brian is an 18-year veteran of the sports training industry. Brian has worked as a performance coach for national team, professional, and Olympic athletes worldwide. He founded the largest youth development educational organization in the industry, serving as its CEO for nearly 8 years, and co-created one of the fastest growing sports and fitness franchises in the United States along with it. He has guest lectured at governmental and private associations around the world, including Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, Italy, Sweden, and the Czech Republic, and throughout North America. Brian authored The Audacity of Success, co-authored the bestseller Total Body Transformation, wrote and co-produced the landmark short film Life by Numbers, and has written for magazines around the globe, including Men's Fitness, Inc. and Bullis. His most recent book, and this sort of pertains to this morning's session, is Mindset Matters Most, and was listed as #1 on the personal development section of Amazon for a period of 7 weeks after its release. Together with his wife and very much his better half, as he says, Carrie Campbell, he hosted the award-winning live stream Brian and Carrie in the Morning, as well as Eliminate Your Limits with Brian and Carrie, which airs in syndication on Sirius XM. He currently serves as the Chief Culture Officer for Metaplexus, as well as faculty director for its subsidiary, Virtue Academy. He holds a religiously accredited PhD in pastoral counseling, and currently works as a business and high-performance consultant for several well-known brands in the health and wellness space, working directly with CEO and COO position heads. And on a personal level, Brian is a competitive power lifter with intentions to win the world championship of powerlifting in 2027. Big goals, bro. And for a span of 12 years, has worked as a bodyguard for several A-list celebrities, which he was sharing with us just before everyone logged on here. With that, Brian, if you want to grab the screen here, I leave you all in the capable hands of Brian Grasso. Thank you, Brian.
Well, thank you very much, Roger. Good morning, everyone. Special thanks to Roger and Brian for inviting me to this. Folks, to know me is to know that I don't like wasting anyone's investment of time or energy. So what I've done today is I've prepared a presentation that is truly practical. I don't want to just talk at you for an hour and offer you, varying scientific realities related to stress and burnout. Instead, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what science tells us are realities you can use in your life immediately, as quickly as tomorrow, to start alleviating some of the stress that is very, very natural in corporate professionals, because in human resources, burnout is real. When invited to this roundtable, I did some investigation related to the realities facing not just corporate professionals, but HR professionals directly. And I was actually quite amazed at the findings that exist. So my intention today is to have you walk away with things that you can use in your life as quickly as tomorrow that will help you decrease stress and increase performance in as little as 20 minutes a day. I think one of the biggest mistakes people like myself often make is we make the solution almost more cumbersome than the problem. And so I do promise you what we're going to talk about today, you can evoke into your life in as early as tomorrow, but it won't take you more than 20 minutes a day to do these things. Now, the presentation I've cultivated and curated for you is a little long, admittedly. So I actually may blow past a few slides to get to some things that I think are even more relevant and more powerful for you. And before we do that, I promise you this slide is not meant to be self-grandizing in the least. Roger just read my bio. But I am intimately aware that in the mindset, culture, and human performance space, There's a lot of people who claim expertise, and I want to make sure you understand that for the next hour or so, I intend to give you real life things from real life experiences I've had. So if we go around the horn from the top left of this particular slide, Lorianne Munzer won a gold medal at 2000 Olympic Games. I was honored to be her performance coach. As Roger mentioned, the next photo over, that's my wife and I at the studios of SiriusXM. We have a show that's in syndication. The next slide over, I don't know if you know the name Joe Polish, but he's recognized as one of the most powerful and impactful entrepreneurs on the planet. We are graced and blessed to do a lot of work with him and his organization called Genius Network. I used to serve as a performance coach with a professional team, the Toronto Maple Leafs of the NHL. One photo below that, my wife still works with NBA athletes. Currently, she'll actually be in New York. And then after that, Washington, D.C. this coming week, working with one of her personal clients. The photo just to the left of that, I don't know if you recognize the shorter bald man, but that's the performing artist Pitbull. We do a lot of work with him and his charter schools around the country. Speaking of which, the next photo is my wife and I working in classroom settings with young adults and teenagers around the United States and Canada. We host live events, the next picture to the left, all over the countries, in fact, all over the world. We've hosted live events all over Europe and North America. And then the last photo on the bottom right is Kurt Browning, four-time world champion. I had the honor of being his performance coach for a long time when he was a competitive athlete as well. So I say all of that not to be self-aggrandizing or impressive. I just think it's important that you generate some trust in some of the things I'll be sharing with you today. I've been where you are. I've worked with high performers, high achievers for a very, very long time, nearly 30 years. And the information I give you today will be both actionable, but truly effective. So in that, I mentioned some of the research I did on HR professionals, and this is what the data showed me. This is from a study by WorkVivo that was published in Forbes magazine only last year. 98% of HR professionals claim to have experienced burnout, including right now, currently. So it's not in the rearview mirror necessarily. At this point, we're talking about statistically almost everybody who works in your line of work considers themselves burnt out. And 94% feel overwhelmed. So burnout and overwhelm seem to be trending as incredibly pervasive in the HR corporate world. The one that really struck me is that 88% of respondents on this rather large study, this was not a small scale study, it involved more than 500 HR professionals in the United States and the United Kingdom. It really struck me to hear that 88% of those respondents claim to dread their work. And they went on to explain that HR professionals, the challenge is that they're the de facto therapists in their corporate structure, dealing with everyone's challenges and their own emotional burnouts and feelings of overwhelm. HR professionals are largely responsible for morale in the corporate structure. And that all goes on top of the common HR gig, which is recruiting, hiring, onboarding, and retention. So when I looked at that, I could certainly understand why it's very commonplace to experience burnout and overwhelm. And what I hope to do today is provide you with some very, very easy things you can do daily to help combat those feelings. What we don't want, maybe it's true of people on this call, perhaps it's not, but what we don't want is 88% of people dreading the work they do. So in my position, knowing my bio and knowing I've worked with Olympic gold medalists and national teams from around the world, professional athletes working off of $8 or $9 million contracts per year, and that includes corporate professionals and 9-figure entrepreneurs, 10-figure entrepreneurs. Generally speaking, the question I get lobbied at me most often is, well, how do I increase my performance? How do I become more productive, more effective, and more efficient? And I understand the nature of the question. When you've had the experiences I've had in the elite high performer, high achiever world, granted, a lot of my job is to find the 1% that makes that high performer an even larger high performer. But one of the things we have to understand is the way the human brain works. We cannot be, our brain cannot be experiencing threat and be in high performance at the same time. It doesn't have that capacity. It's in one or the other. And when I look at the fact that 98% of HR professionals claim to either have experienced burnout or are currently experiencing burnout, and that 94% feel overwhelmed, well, we can't even start talking about high performance or increasing performance unless or until we talk about decreasing threat and decreasing stress. And so we're going to start there today. How do we decrease the neural threat that we're experiencing? How do we decrease our stress? Once we have that locked in place, we can have a much more flourishing conversation about now, how do we increase performance? And I promise I'll cover both today, but I will encourage you to really work hard at the decreasing threat summary that I've put together for you today, because again, and I'll be saying a few neurological axioms as this presentation go on, and I'll even make a note. If you're taking notes today, take this one down. So this is my first of that. The human brain cannot be in threat and in high performance at the same time. It can only be in one or the other. So in order to increase our performance, we have to appreciate the inverse relationship. Increasing performance means decreasing threat and stress. So over the
Brian,
course of the,
Brian,
yeah,
yes, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say to everyone, if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to ask your questions. Use the Q&A tab at the bottom, and as opposed to the chat window, we're not using the chat window. So pop it in the Q&A, and I will make sure that you, I will find the pauses to ask those questions of Brian, and we'll get them answered for you.
Please, and thank you. I forgot to mention that.
Yes.
Also, guys, I'm the most informal man on the planet. Interrupt me whenever you want. It's never going to be a problem at all. No concern. So as the day goes on today, and Roger, could you remind me, do I have an hour?
Yeah, we typically go till about 12:15.
Okay, perfect.
So we're at we're at
just under an hour.
Yeah.
Excellent, wonderful. Okay, so we're going to start by defining neural threat, which really is just a new age term that used to be called stress. But we understand stress more now, and we understand the implications it has on our nervous system. So we've kind of evolved the definition, or the terminology. It's called neural threat now, and I'll explain why. We'll make that definable so you understand it. And then we'll start talking about how to decrease that threat. Given the time frame I have, I can tell you right now, I'm going to go through the first 15. We'll probably bypass the personal core values, because although it's powerful, it has much less power at decreasing neural threat than does this first 15, which I'll explain when we get there. And then when it comes to increasing performance, once our threat is mitigated and it's much lower, we're going to talk about the 4 pillars of mindset. What are the 4 exercises that literally every human being should do every single day, whether they're athletes, corporate professionals, or anybody in between, to generate a mind that is performance oriented and not threat oriented. So that's what we'll go through today. And when we look at the definition of neural threat, it's actually very, very simple. When the brain detects potential problem or problems, it instigates the sympathetic part of our nervous system to initiate a flight, fight, or freeze response. Now, by and large, I'm certain you've heard of those relative axioms before. When the brain detects a problem or problems, it stimulates the nervous system, or more specifically, the sympathetic part of our nervous system, to initiate a flight, fight, or freeze response. But now we have to look at why that's important. So we'll start that by identifying for you how you know if you might be embedded in the sympathetic part of your autonomic nervous system. If you have feelings of withdrawing, meaning you want to just remove yourself from a situation, or you want to isolate, or you get home after a long day and you just want to be by yourself, there are degrees of all of that being quite healthy. But there are also degrees, if it becomes behavioral, it's an indication that your sympathetic nervous system is far too stimulated. And that would include non-serving habits. It's a topic no one really enjoys talking about, but I'll leave it at a schematic for you guys. Anything from substance dependency, that includes alcohol, nicotine, certainly drugs that would be considered more illicit or illegal, but all the way to eating as a coping mechanism. It's not my place to judge nor define things for you. But what I want you to do is begin to increase your own self-awareness for when you might be in that unhealthy territory of needing to withdraw or needing things like a cigarette or a drink or food to calm you down and give you a sense of comfort. If any of that rings true for you, you're likely overstimulated in the sympathetic part of your nervous system, and that's compelling your nervous system to want you to flee a situation, okay? Fight would be another one. If you tend to be very argumentative or very defensive, you argue your point, you defend your position, and you do so on a regular basis without giving grace or empathy for what the other person, what their opinion might be, or the fact that I'm drowning them in my own superiority to the point where I'm not even listening to what they have to say anymore. That might be a part of your personality. That might be a temperament trait. I certainly give room for that. But more often than not, it's a nervous system that's compelling you to fight. Your sympathetic nervous system is compelling you to defend yourself. And I want you to look at it that way. You're not a jerk necessarily. You're not, you don't love to argue necessarily. But if you find yourself constantly arguing and defending your points, it is a telltale sign that your sympathetic nervous system is overstimulated. You've got too much threat going through your nervous system. And what happens at that point is your nervous system gives you cues and clues that it wants you to defend yourself, to protect yourself. Very often, the most aggressive person in the room is actually the person who feels the most need to protect themselves. So they will go on the offensive to prevent having to go on the defensive, okay? The next part of that nervous system trifecta is freeze. And this is very common in the corporate space. Procrastination and overthinking are two very telltale signs, as would be second guessing or self-doubt. If you find yourself procrastinating on work, overthinking, self-doubt, in the space of second guessing everything you do and every decision you make, my honest advice to you is to not necessarily look for books or resources that teach you how to stop procrastinating. And the reason is this: procrastination is almost never a thing unto itself. It's the result of a thing. We don't need to learn how to stop procrastinating. We have to go upstream to understand why we are. And in most cases of corporate professionals I've dealt with who list procrastination as one of their biggest challenges, the issue is not procrastination. The issue is neural threat. They're in a great deal of stress. And in that stress, the frontal cortex of the brain, which is responsible for decision-making, rationality, and logic, it starts to shut down. So much of the resources of our body go to the back third, even the middle of the brain, the amygdala and the cerebellum. These are the parts of the brain that are responsible for emotion and survival. So if I have a big increase of neural threat or stress, a lot of the resources go to the back or middle of my brain. Very little resources come to the front, meaning procrastination isn't the problem. The problem is the part of your brain that's responsible for logic and rationality and critical thinking and solution orientation literally is starving. So it's not able to produce the way you want it to. Now, I hope that one hit home for you, because the number of corporate professionals I've worked with personally who have issues with procrastination, overthinking, self-doubt, second guessing, who are always reaching for solutions to end those things, when in fact, those things are not the problem. They simply have too much neural threat, and it's rendering the brain incapable of solving problems in an effective way. So I hope that one rang true for you in particular. Just to give some definables, the autonomic nervous system is split into two branches, sympathetic and parasympathetic. The parasympathetic part of our nervous system is responsible for our peace, our tranquility, our calm, our joy, our happiness. The sympathetic part of our nervous system for our frustration, our worry, our anxiety, our sadness. Now, it may not come as a surprise to you that modern humans live most of their life in the sympathetic part of their autonomic nervous system, which is not healthy. It's not healthy. It's not productive. It diminishes your capacity as a corporate officer, a corporate professional, an athlete, or anybody in between. And even things like digestion, if we have digestion problems, even things like bathroom challenges, you have trouble either going or going too much to the bathroom, diffuse pain throughout the body, a stubborn shoulder or low back pain, headaches. These are very common physical symptoms that result from a sympathetic nervous system that is too stimulated. And what we do is we often go to doctors to treat digestion or to treat pain or to treat headaches, when in fact, just like procrastination, those things aren't the problem. They are the result of a greater problem. And that greater problem is an organism that's dealing with too much threat. And the way I want you to look at threat is that it's a bucket. I know it sounds a little bit like a silly metaphor, but it gives a great illustration. There's a bucket somewhere in your nervous system. And in that bucket, we accumulate stress and threat. Now, if I were to pour water into a bucket without relieving it of some of that water, eventually it's going to overflow. And when it overflows, we procrastinate, we overthink, we self-doubt, we get digestion issues, we get physical pain, we get headaches. These are the things we have to understand, that neural threat is a very real thing, and it can cause a myriad of health and performance-related issues in corporate professionals. And the whole concept of threat is not meant to be evasive or elusive. We have environmental threat. Just before we started recording, I was talking to Roger and Brian. I was saying, look, right now I live on the far west side of Arizona. I live way out in the desert. There are very few neighbors. There's not any noise. Transpose that, I was in Manhattan 3 weeks ago. And as soon as I got there, I got off the plane, I took the Uber, I got into Soho, I felt it immediately. There was noise everywhere. People's voices, car horns, engines. I was immersed in an environmental threat that I'm not used to. So threat, we can accumulate threat from a myriad of places: emotional, social, societal, auditory, visual, even nutritional. Yes, the things we eat can either release us from threat or cause more threat. As a matter of fact, it's one of the most important things I hope you take from this. I'm not telling you to eat your greens or stay away from fried foods. You're an adult, you make decisions for yourself. But I am telling you the science is very complete on this now. It's not a suggestion anymore. Mental and emotional health is directly related to nutritional habits. What we put in our mouth that gets digested in our gut affects our mental and emotional capacity. So I'll leave it there. Your adults make decisions for yourself, but any number of things can create threat and stress in our body. Now that's normal. We don't live in bubbles. We live in a vibrant world that has noise and pollution and not so healthy foods. We can't escape it. It's not about escaping threat or stress. It's about learning to mitigate it so that as it accumulates, we have measures to remove it from our system. That way it never overflows and it never causes us the destructive problems that I've just listed, okay? Now, worthy of noting, the biggest brain threat, when I talk about the nervous system, that's governed by your brain. Brain and spinal cord is the autonomic nervous system. So what is the biggest threat our nervous system will ever encounter? Believe it or not, it's not what most people think. Change. Whether that change is good or bad. Believe it or not, if you get a promotion at work, you're making more money now, your brain perceives that as a threat. If you move from Long Island to Manhattan, even if it's for a great reason and you're really excited about it ostensibly, your brain's perceiving it as a threat. So every time anything in our world changes, our brain accepts that change as a threat to its system. If you're taking notes today, take this one. Your brain likes predictability and routine. And anytime we deviate away from predictability and routine, we have to understand our brain is perceiving that as a threat. Now, can you imagine the impact that has on your goals? Say you want to lose weight, say you want to get more productive at work, say you want a promotion, so you're vying for those things. Well, inevitably, to get those things, which critically, they're things you don't have now, you have to change parts of your routine, parts of your mentality, parts of your working life. You have to create change behaviorally and habitually to achieve your goals. That's the biggest threat for your brain, though. And if you're taking notes today, really take this one. Your brain will never fight for better. It fights for what it knows. If you've ever tried to achieve anything, and I'm just going to use weight loss as a very ubiquitous example. If you've ever tried to lose weight, you know as well as anybody that along the way you begin to sabotage your own efforts. That's true of any goal you've ever had. As you try to achieve it, you augment behaviors, you change habits, you take on different actions every single day, all for the purpose of achieving that goal. But your brain won't help you fight for what's better. It wants to pull you back to what it knows. Self-sabotage is nothing more than your brain trying to realign you to what it's comfortable with. And again, imagine the impact it has on your goals. Here's a worthy stat for you to know. In the United States of America, roughly 250 million people create goals every single year. 92% of them do not achieve those goals. Only 8% of Americans who create goals actually achieve them. And again, we can get into, well, we need to manage our time better, or we need to reorient our habits and our behaviors. And that's the conversation that most people have. I didn't achieve my goal, so I have to look out here to change things. No, you need to look inside. The reason you're not achieving your goals is because your brain is trying to pull you back to what it knows. And that brings us to the most important thing I can teach you about decreasing neural threat. Your brain will always fight for what it knows, not what's better. Anytime you change anything, whether it's you initiating a change or an external event requiring you to change, your brain perceives it as threat. We also know that car horns, engines, food, lack of water, too much caffeine, all of these have elements of neural threat. That bucket inside of you is getting more full by the day. And we're not releasing some of the water from that bucket. So now it's overflowing. We're procrastinating, we're overthinking, we're second guessing, we're self-doubting, we're experiencing headaches, we're experiencing back pain, all of the anxiety, depression, sadness. These are all elements that are instigated by neural threat. So let's talk about how we begin to mitigate that. And it starts with what I call the first 15. All that implies is simply this: the first 15 minutes of your day, every day, should include 4 items. Now, these are simple things. Granted, they're very simple. But if you were to do them consistently for a matter of 2 weeks, what I can promise you is that you would begin to feel very differently and much better almost immediately. Okay, so let's walk through them. First 15. What's number 1? Where do we start? First sun. Okay, first sun. Now, look at first sun is about the most amazing thing our universe offers us. And it's different than high noon. If you ever gaze towards the sun when it's high in the sky, you get a lot of yellows and a lot of whites. So much so it's really hard to look at it. But if you've ever seen a sunrise or a sunset, we could call this first sun or last sun. Either one's fine. But if you ever looked at that sunrise or sunset, what you mostly get is orange. That orange is a hue that has a massive effect on us systemically. When we look into the sun's rise or the sunset, the rays of the sun, those orange hues, are actually resetting our melatonin. And they're resetting our circadian rhythms. People ask me a great deal because sleep is a huge part of neural threat and high performance. So, Brian, what's the best way to ensure I get a good sleep tonight? The very best way to make sure you get a good sleep tonight, every night, is to get first sun in your eyes that morning, because it will reset your melatonin and reset your circadian rhythms. It'll also reset your nervous system, which means it will start to mitigate and eliminate some of that neural threat that's been accumulating. It stimulates our visual sensory, which actually translates into energy. Most people look to coffee or some kind of stimulant, caffeine, first thing in the morning. We're going to explain in about 1 second why that's what we should not do. Okay, we'll explain that and give you alternatives instead. But the greatest jolt of energy you're going to experience every single morning is not going to come from a mug of coffee. It's going to come from first sun getting into your eyes. So the first thing I want you to do, I want you to consider doing, is get first sun. Now, I try to make this as practical as possible. I don't want to talk about me, but I'll tell you how I do this, okay? Because this is a 5 morning a week endeavor for me. My alarm goes off. I get up, I get dressed, I go right outside. And for what it's worth, and I think I want you to hear this, my brain is kicking and screaming almost every morning, every time. It doesn't want to go outside. It wants me to press snooze. It wants me to go into the kitchen and just sit down with a nice cup of coffee. My brain has no interest in walking outside. I've simply trained my brain to not overthink the process. And as my wife always says, don't think, just go. So my alarm goes off, I get dressed, I go right outside. And what do I do when I get out there? Number 2 of our list, light locomotion. Now, as Roger mentioned in my bio, I'm a highly competitive athlete, but I'm going to tell you something. If I tried to train first thing in the morning, my brain would resist it so heavily, I wouldn't even be able to get into the car to go to the gym. So I'm not talking about a training session necessarily. I'm talking about light locomotion. When we sleep for 6, 7, 8 hours, our joints get very compressed. Our muscles get very short. The action, Roger, I see there's a cue there. Do you want me to pause?
Yeah, there's so we have a question here. I think you covered it, but maybe it needs to be restated. Is sunrise first sun or sun in general?
Great question. So it's first sun being sunrise. A lot of the research is also showing now that sunset is equally valuable in the same vein.
It has to do with the quality of the light, the nature of the light, you're saying.
Yes, it has to do with the orange hues versus the yellow whites. That said, sun is never a bad. The reason I like the question is I don't want anyone walking away from this saying, geez, I can't get first sun in the morning for any number of reasons. That's fine. Sun at any time is a good thing. Sun towards your eyes is a good thing. First and last sun of the day is the most powerful thing. So great question. Really.
And here's another question. Do you recommend red light or artificial light for those of us who live in the Northeast? And added that this person says I'm up before sunrise. And I just want to say that for those who are doing the mental calculation here, right now, sunrise is before 7. By October 9th is will be the date that it will be 7:01 will be sunrise. So if anyone has it in their head that they can't quite manage before 7, but they could do it if and get out there and have some of that first sun in their face. at 7 as a line in the sand. That date, your start date would be October 9th, Monday, October 9th. So jot that.
I love that you research that. You know, guys, these questions are great. And so I say this humbly, you're beating me to the punch in a great way, because I live in Arizona right now, which means it's always sunny. In the summer, the sun wakes up at around 3:45 in the morning. So I get first sun for a solid hour if I really want it. But I'm from Toronto, Canada originally, which means not only do I know the weather patterns of New York very, very well, but they're identical to what I was raised in. Moreover, and I was explaining to Roger and Elise prior to this recording starting, for about 3 years, I lived way up in the mountains of Quebec, the province of Quebec, which you'd think the weather patterns are very similar to New York. They're not. In the dead of winter, the sun didn't rise until about 9:30 in the morning. And it set in the dead of winter at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We got a very short window of sun. So the reason I say all that is to say this. I'm really well attuned with how to make this more practical and flexible for people who don't live in the gift of sun that is Arizona like I do. I'm not from here. So I'm used to making this work on your terms as well. And let's talk about that as we move forward. But light locomotion, just it lubes our joints and it restores our muscle length to what it should be. It also creates a huge amount of energy in us systemically. So me living in Arizona right now, and if you have the capacity to do this where you are, my ideal for you is simply this: get outside at first sun and walk towards it. Literally walk towards the sun. You can stare at it. You don't have to. You can simply gaze at it from time to time. Generally speaking, you just want the sun in your eyes. By any means, just get the sun in your eyes as you stroll towards it. Generally speaking, I'll walk towards the sun for about 5 minutes, and then I'll turn around and walk home. And there's 10 minutes of my day done. But I've done the two things that research tells us are the most powerful things to decrease neural threat. Now, let's make this a bit more practical for you. I think I have a slide about this coming up in a bit, but I like the questions that came in. Yes, first sun is best. Yes, last sun or sunset is probably second best. But sun at any time is great. Sun at any time is great. So what I would encourage you to do, if first sun and last sun don't work for you, what I would encourage you to do is every time you take a break from work, look out the window. Literally look out the window. Look towards the sun. If you can't see the sun from your window, then take the elevator downstairs and step outside for 3 minutes and look at the sun. There's a vast difference between reasons and excuses. That I get up before the sun is a great reason and a fair one. That I can't get first sun in my eyes. That for me in Quebec, the sun rose at 3:45 in the morning. That's a good reason. I'm not getting first sun. But as the day goes on, if the simple conjecture is that I can every couple hours just go look outside and get some sunlight in my eyes, maybe that's third best compared with first and last sun, but it's still having an effect on neural threat. And if the argument then is, well, I can't look at the sun at any point of the day ever, I would encourage you to consider whether or not you're in excuse territory now. Certainly you can take 30 seconds to look out a window. Certainly you can take 30 seconds to walk outside and look at the sun. The science is so compelling on how much the act of just doing that is amongst the most powerful things known to humankind that can decrease neural threat, means that I would be anxious and antsy simply to figure out how I can make it work in my day. And light locomotion is no different. If you can't get outside for a 3 to 10 minute walk every single morning, I can accept that. But aside from any fitness pursuits you may have, finding ways just to go for a 2, a 3, or a 4-minute walk at some point in the day while you're observing the sun, even better. These are things that will keep your neural threat down. What I don't want is procrastination, overthinking, anxiety, depression to continue being pervasive concerns in our society. These very, very minor things have shown incredible traction at decreasing all the things I just mentioned. So I see there's one more question. Do you want me to go to the next two, or do you want to stop for that question first, Roger?
No, it was not another question. It's you can keep going.
Okay, great. Okay, so we've got two: sun, light locomotion. The next one is hydration. And this is where I'll bring caffeine into the mix. There's no scientific study I've ever seen or consulted that says caffeine's a bad thing. So that's a good thing. If you like coffee, you like your energy drinks, that's good. I have no problem with that. I won't try to talk you out of it. I love coffee myself. What I am suggesting and what the science shows is that the timing of the caffeine matters a great deal. So we have to appreciate that our brain functions off of two things: water and carbohydrates. Most of us are dehydrated. Generally speaking, and this is a very general comment, and it depends a lot on how active you are, but even largely inactive people, largely sedentary people, still need about a half gallon to a gallon of water a day to function optimally. We're nowhere near that marker. Most of us are nowhere near that marker of a half gallon to a gallon of water a day, but your brain functions off of water. It increases neural conductivity, which means you make decisions faster and easier. And it optimizes the muscle and joint response of our body, all of which serves to decrease pain and decrease threat. As an example, let me ask you this. Have you ever been in massive physical pain? Your shoulder, your hip, your lower back, whatever it might be. Well, let me ask you to remember that for 1 second, and let me ask you this follow-up question. How stressed were you in the presence of that pain? The answer is you were stressed. Whether you think you were or weren't, you were stressed, because physical pain has a compound effect on mental and emotional pain as well. The point I'm raising: water increases my brain function, it increases the capacity at which I work, and it decreases the pain I'm experiencing in my body, all of which decrease threat. So for me, I go for my walk, I look at the sun, I turn around, I walk home. The second I walk home, I drink 4 glasses of water. I didn't start that way. I started with a glass. When I felt comfortable with that habit, I moved it to 2, then 3, now 4. 4 glasses of water is about a half liter, quarter gallon. So 25 to 35% of my water is done for the entire day, first thing in the morning. Caffeine should come about an hour to 2 hours later. Caffeine does give you a boost. Caffeine does give you an energized capacity. That's not untrue. It's scientifically very valid. But when caffeine comes first, the cycle moves into energy quick. And then if you've ever experienced this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The bottom drops out of that energy about an hour later. That's what happens when we put caffeine in our bodies first. We ride the wave and then it drops. So you reach for a second coffee, maybe a third. The problem is the energy doesn't regain itself. Now you're just drinking coffee. The caffeine in that coffee is maybe giving you a small sputter of energy. But what it is doing is it's keeping you lethargic for a longer period of time. If you drink water first, 2, 3, 4 glasses, if you can get to that right away, great. If not, start with 1. And then you follow it up with caffeine an hour or 2 hours later. That caffeine burst will hit, but then it will sustain. When the body and the brain is nourished with hydration, when its water is good, it allows the caffeine high to sustain. So you won't necessarily want nor need a second cup of coffee. And you won't hit that plummet of energy, lethargy, mid-morning, early afternoon. So that's the third thing. This is the first 15. Get sun, light locomotion, hydrate, and then lastly, eat. I still can't believe how few people eat breakfast in our society. And I'm not saying that cynically. I'm just saying, of all the things we know to be true about the human condition and how it operates and what we need, even a little bit of food first thing in the morning is so essential. I won't get deep into it because we're getting short on time, but this part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, and this part of your brain, the cerebellum, are responsible for two very different things. This part of your brain is logic, rational reasoning, critical thinking, problem solving. This is survival. When you don't eat, your brain goes into a threat condition. It thinks you're starving. It can't logically deduce that I'm fasting or it's just breakfast. I'll grab some lunch in a bit. There's no reasoning in this part of your brain. It feels as though you're starving. So it'll start sending up alarm bells systemically in you to feed it. Okay? The more active this part of your brain is, the less active this part of your brain is. Do the math. If you need to go and solve problems and be focused and have attention to detail, but this part of your brain is not working optimally, you can't do any of those things, which is why you overthink, second guess, self-doubt, procrastinate, etc., etc., etc. So get a little bit of food in your stomach within 15 to 20 minutes of waking up. For me, guys, I'm as busy as anybody. I own 3 businesses. I'm a competitive athlete. I have a wife, 2 kids, 2 dogs, and a guinea pig. I know busy like everybody else. So I had to hack it. How do I make breakfast easy without making it time consumptive? One of 2 things. I've just learned to make quick and easy smoothies at home. The entire process takes 30 seconds. Oat milk, some protein powder, some honey, some blueberries, some spinach, blend it. And now as I'm getting dressed for the day, I can just sip on it until it's done. The other thing I do, every Sunday, I hard boil 24 eggs. I shell them, I put them in Tupperware, I cover them with water, I put the Tupperware in the fridge. They last for a week. So if I don't feel like a smoothie, don't have time for a smoothie, I grab 2 already peeled hard-boiled eggs and I'm munching them as I get ready for the day. It keeps me out of neural threat. And that's the key. It keeps me out of neural threat. So again, simple stuff. Sunlight in the eyes, light locomotion, hydrate, and get even a little bit of quality whole food into your belly. Those 4 things done minimally 5 days a week decrease your neural threat considerably. And it's a compound effect. What I mean by that is, let's just say my threat bucket is overflowing right now, and I start this regime tomorrow. Okay, that's good. I start to mitigate that neural threat. But if I really did it 2, 3, 4, 5 days a week, and then even more so 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks in a row, the compound effect is that my neural threat never climbs back up to a point of it being dangerous. The compound effect of me doing these 4 things regularly keeps neural threat in check. Okay? Now, before I move on to some performance things, Roger, anybody, are there any questions we might want to go through?
Guys, any questions? We have you've got the expert here, so feel free to chime in. And if you think of them while we are going into the next segment, I will pause and make sure we get your question in. So it's all good, great stuff so far, Brian.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. It's always funny to teach and talk to a group who you can't see, because I read body language and facial expressions very, very well. So I appreciate you just said that, Roger. I am looking at my time. I know I have about 15 minutes. So I'm going to be a little hurried through this next part, but I promise to deliver it in totality and completion so you can walk away with it. Okay. And I think this worked out great, because what we have here is we have one 4-part system for decreasing your neural threat, right? Sun, light locomotion, hydration, food. That decreases neural threat. Now, how do we move into high performance if we get neural threat taken care of well? How do we move into high performance? Okay, here it is. 4 pillars of mindset. This is a process that my wife and I have created, curated, and cultivated for the last 15 years. Field tested incredibly well on people worldwide, varying socioeconomic backgrounds, varying degrees of high performer, high achiever, certainly elite athletes, certainly corporate professionals, and everybody in between. Okay, so let's talk about what those 4 exercises are. Number 1 is called Count Your Wins. Easy exercise to do, and we have to appreciate why. We have between 60 to 85,000 thoughts per day. Most of those are largely unconscious, meaning we're not conscious of the fact that we have those thoughts. Here's the kicker. 80% of those thoughts are negative and 70% are recurring. Like, just think about that equation for a second. On the high average, you have 85,000 thoughts a day, which means over 70,000 of them are negative. And over 55,000 of them are the same thoughts you had yesterday. So you're negative, but you're negative about the same things every single day. Now, you may not know that. You may self-describe as a positive person, a happy person. We see this constantly in people who I would consider, self-help junkies. They read all the self-help books, they go to the seminars, they love Tony Robbins, all of which is great stuff. I would never, ever, ever, ever suggest otherwise. But what a lot of the self-help world isn't talking about, isn't telling you, is that beneath this conscious brain, you have a monstrously large unconscious mind. We all do. And that's where a lot of your pain and experience and influence and suffering, a lot of it's housed there. And you're not conscious of it. That's why it's called the unconscious. Unless or until we start to write the narratives in the unconscious, I can claim to be very positive. I can claim to be very happy. The sad part is that most of the people claiming those things actually aren't. And I promise you, I'm not being cynical towards you in the least. I promise you that. But for me, it's like, we've got to know the score. We've got to appreciate what the truth is about the sciences of mind and mindset. On the high average, 85,000 thoughts a day. 70,000 or so of those are negative, and more than 55,000 are the same negative thoughts you thought yesterday. So the way we start to change that is by regrooving neural patterns in your actual brain. Now, what the science is really easy in its illustration is simply this. Your brain's number 1 capacity, its number 1 job is to keep you alive and safe. Okay? Here's the challenge of that. If I think the same thing every day, and I'm just going to be hypothetical, I'll never be successful. I'm not smart enough to be successful. Man, I envy that person who's so successful. I'll never make enough money. If these are my thoughts every single day and they're recurring, your brain says to itself, okay, hold on. He keeps saying the same thing. That means that thought is really important for his survival. That's why he keeps telling me the same thing. So I'm going to lay a neural pathway now to make it easier for that thought to work faster. That's how your brain operates. Whatever you give it on a regular basis, it accepts as a very important part of your survival, and it will aid you in making that thought better and faster. It starts to lay myelin down through that pathway to make the conductivity of that thought even faster. We have to re-engineer these neural pathways. And how do we do that? This is my suggestion. Last thing you do before you go to bed every single night is you take your journal or a notebook and you mentally rehearse the day you just had, and you start to enumerate the wins. You don't go the other direction. You resist going the other direction. The other direction is, yeah, but. Well, this happened, but. Or mostly it was a crappy day. No, critically enumerate your wins. The question I get often is, what if you don't have any wins in a given day? That question is part of the problem. We're so pre-programmed to see things all negative, we don't even notice or perspectify the good things that happen. I had a client one time who weighed over 400 pounds, and he needed to lose weight badly. He didn't go see a trainer. He came to see me because he believed it was a mindset issue, and he was right. So one time I called him and I said, hey, what were your wins today? He said, I had no wins today. I said, everybody's got wins. Go ahead and tell me what your day was like. He said, you want to hear, oh, I had no wins today, Brian? I woke up and I was craving donuts. So I went to the Krispy Kreme, about a dozen donuts, and I ate 10 of them. I need to lose weight. I'm 400 pounds. I'm going to die. What is the win of eating 10 donuts? You know what I said to him? You didn't eat all 12. Now, I don't know if you chuckled at that. I don't know if you think that's silly. It's not. Your brain needs to learn where the wins exist in your day-to-day life. The fact he didn't eat 12 donuts, that was a perspective I needed him to count as a win. Whatever your day was, glorious or horrible, find some wins and write them down. That's the last thing I want you to do before you go to bed every night. Now, there's reasons to the timing. You may sleep, your brain doesn't. Your brain is going to perseverate as you sleep. It's going to perseverate on the last thing you were thinking about before you went to bed. For most people, the last thing you think about is all the negative crap that happened on the day that just was and the anxiety you're carrying for the day to come. No wonder insomnia is a normal thing in our society. No wonder people don't sleep well. The last thing they think about is the crap they just had to endure and the anticipation of the crap they have to endure tomorrow. Rewrite that script. Count your wins every single night. Then put your journal down, go to bed. Okay? That's exercise number one. And guys, this is high performance. This is what I had Lorianne Munzer, who won an Olympic gold medal. This is what I had her do. Kurt Browning, Toronto Maple Leafs. My list of elite athletes and corporate professionals can go on and on and on. This is what I have people do. So they start to see the world in a different way, and their brain starts to see it that way as well. That's number one. Number two, review your direction. Now, if I had my choice, you would do this first thing in the morning. If I was being flexible, I'd say do it when you first get to work, either to your office, your home office. Before you get to work, before you start the action of working on the day, I want you to do this exercise. Review your direction. All it means is you grab your notebook, you grab your journal, and you write out the 5 to 7 things you intend to accomplish today. What are my intentions today? Now, I get it. Like you, I'm busy, I'm scattered, and I have to put out fires a lot of the time in the day. I'm not telling you this list has to be biblical. It doesn't have to be written in stone, and it can't not change. What I am telling you is this. The brain works under 2 parameters, open loop and closed loop. Most people enter their working day in an open loop brain augmentation. What that means is this. Remember how I told you about 45 minutes ago, your brain likes predictability and it likes routine. If you don't inform your brain at the beginning of a day what you intend to accomplish that day, you're leaving it open to be unbelievably reactive to everything that comes your way. And that's different than being responsive to it. Good athletes, good corporate professionals, great corporate professionals, one of the only thing that deciphers them, great to good, is their capacity to focus. That's one of the only things statistically that is the difference between good to great, capacity to focus. When I write out the 5 to 7 things every single day before I get to work, before I start working at my desk, I tell my brain this is what I intend to do today. It closes the loop. The brain is no longer wondering and worrying what's coming next. It's perseverating on the things I just told it I want it to accomplish. And it's going to help me solve those things. It is unbelievable how powerful this is. Roger, please.
Yes. Good stuff. Just looping into a question here, dipping back a little bit. Someone asks, how many wins should we strive for to find on average?
Great question. The answer is entirely up to you. I know it's a little too open for you, perhaps. It's a great question, but the only way to make mindset work for you is to make it yours. Make this process yours. Over under, I try to get my athletes and my corporate professionals to strive for no fewer than 3. The problem I've realized is when I say 3, people aim for 3. And that's not you, that's your brain. When the number 3 comes out, your brain says, aha, 3. So 3 is what I'm aiming for. I like to leave it more open than that. How about this? As many as you possibly can. That's my honest answer.
And one more question, dipping back a little further, and not to interrupt your flow. So we
No,
got
it's
to keep
okay.
getting the flow, but back to the sort of morning routine thing. Diane asks, what if you fast?
Yeah, intermittent fasting's become really popular. So generally speaking, in nutrition and health, things go in trends and fads. I'm not suggesting intermittent fasting is a trend or a fad. It has come on the last 10 years and has gained in massive popularity. Believe it or not, a lot of the science related to its effects are actually largely unknown. I know that there's a lot of trumpeting about how powerful and good it is for you. In reality, the science is very incomplete, and you're talking about bias at that point. But here's the over-under. I would never tell anybody to stop fasting. I'm not a nutrition expert. It's not my purview. I know the brain. I know how to maximize the brain's productivity and effectiveness. So if you were to ask me, I'd say don't intermittently fast. Your brain needs food. It wants food. But I'm not a nutrition person. So
I mean, what comes to mind to me, and I have dabbled. There is I think it's like a what's the cycle? Is it 16? 16 hours, 8 hours, or
okay.
what few people are fasting for 16 hours, eating for 8?
Yep.
Maybe if you are someone who fasts, reorder your fast.
Could be.
So that you are so that you are fueling your brain with food in the morning, and then you do your 8 hours from there if you are following that 8 on, 16 off. And then after that 8 hours, then you begin your fast.
Yep.
So that you just changed whatever the time frame of that fast is. Another a person's asking, can you summarize the review of your direction again?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me do that. Let me say this first.
Okay, yeah.
And I want to be very, very clear. I don't minimize nor trivialize intermittent fasting, but I am humbly telling you, I'm not a nutrition expert. I know the brain. So I can only, what I always want people in expertise positions to do is to speak. If they're going to speak from bias, which we all do, at least acknowledge that, right? The person who paid for the study on intermittent fasting promotes intermittent fasting. That's fine. At least tell me that, though. So what I'm telling you is that I have a bias. I have a brain expertise, not a nutrition one. So from a brain bias perspective, my answer is your brain needs food. But that is not to trivialize nor even mitigate the fact that intermittent fasting can be very healthy. Truth is, I'm not the guy to ask because I don't know. And I do think more experts need to say, I don't know. But I don't, unfortunately. But thank you, Roger, for you chiming in with your experience with it. Yeah, review your direction. Simplest terms, before you start work on a day, write down the 5 to 7 things you intend to accomplish that day. Look, guys, truth is, maybe you relate, maybe you don't. Most corporate professionals are busy, but not necessarily productive. I don't mean that as a shot, but it's really hard to fudge statistics. The average corporate professional works on average about 2 hours and 20 minutes a day. And that's, again, that's not because you're not willing, not smart, not wanting to. It's because we can get distracted easily by things we have to react to, things that might not be in our control. I accept all that. But what I am saying is that your brain is in your control. If you're taking notes today, take this one. You don't work for your brain. Your brain works for you. So whatever stimulus you feed it is what it will mirror back to you. When I write down the 5 to 7 things I intend to accomplish every day, when I write that down in the morning, I'm giving my brain a directive. This is what I intend to do. This is what we intend to do together. As fires come my way, I don't react to them as much. I do what I have to do, but my brain is working on those 5 to 7 things. So that's the exercise review direction. It changes the parameter from busy to productive, which is exactly what we want. Okay. Third exercise of the high performance loop, imagine your outcome. Now, I recognize that I literally have a minute left and 2 exercises to go. So I'm going to have to go brief, but I'm going to put up one slide at the end that should help everything. Adults always say to me, "What, you want me to imagine what I want?" The answer is yes. I want you to imagine what you want. And you got to remember, my background in high performance is with athletes. So visualization has been part of the fluency of athletes for 2 decades. Why should you or I be any different? The truth is, and hear me out on this, have you ever felt anxiety? Have you ever felt afraid? The answer is yes. Yes, you have, because you're human. But let's dissect what anxiety is for a second. Anxiety is future projecting towards something I'm afraid could come true. What's another word for all of that? Imagination. You're imagining crap that hasn't happened yet, and it's making you anxious in the moment. You are imagining. Truth is, about 72 times a day, the average adult human slips into imagination. The problem, most of that imagination is incredibly negative. It's incredibly negative and incredibly anxiety producing. So the simple way for me to explain this in the time constraint I have is I want you to start imagining what it is you want, as opposed to what it is you don't. My athletes never imagine losing. They imagine winning. They don't imagine the what if this bad thing happens. They imagine the what if this great thing happens. That's the essence of high performance. Okay. Here's my very last slide, Roger. I promise.
Mm-hmm.
The 4th exercise, learn your language. Now, this could be extrapolated.
I think we're good. I think we're good for a few more.
Okay,
minutes.
great. This could be extrapolated to a long lesson, but I of course will condense it.
Mm-hmm.
Our brain talks to us in 4 ways. Number 1, the internal dialogue going through your brain, your self-talk. That's number 1. Number 2, your emotional profile. 70 some odd % of adults in North America have what's called low-grade anxiety. They're walking around with it every day. It's not severe enough to be diagnosed, but it's still there. And what I want to impress upon you is that there's a distinct difference between common and normal. It's common to have low-grade anxiety. That shouldn't be conflated with it being normal to have low-grade anxiety. As a systemic organism, we're not meant to walk around with low-grade anxiety. Talk about a telltale sign that our sympathetic nervous system is overstimulated. Okay, so self-talk, emotional profile, physical symptoms, pain, headaches, digestion issues. That's a language our body is trying to express to us. It's trying to tell us something. And lastly is behavior, all of which we've covered in some element today. The need to withdraw, the need to have a drink, the need to eat less than healthy foods. And notice I'm using the word need. On Saturday night, I want to have a drink. On Saturday night, I want to have pizza. That's a lot different than I need to have a drink in order to relax from the state I've been in for the last 8 hours. So the point is, our dialogue, our emotional profile, our physical symptoms, and our behaviors are all measures of language. They're measures of the brain trying to tell us things. Okay, so this exercise is easy, simple, not always fun. I'll be the first one to admit that, and here it is. My preference is you do it first thing in the morning. It takes 30 seconds. A quiet space by yourself, if that's possible. No distractions, if that's possible. I want you to sit and listen. Just listen. What are you saying to yourself? As you start hearing the dialogue, write it down. Don't censor it. Don't edit it. Don't reframe it to something more positive. Just write down exactly what you hear. Do the same for what you feel emotionally. I feel anxious. I feel agitated. I feel sad. Do the same thing for how you feel physically. My stomach is upset. I have a pain in my left hip. Just start to know yourself better. What are you saying to yourself? How do you feel emotionally and how do you feel physically? Guys, these are things we turn off. We repress on a regular basis. In order to truly vault into high performance, we must increase in our own self-awareness. We have to understand ourselves better. Now, the question is, okay, once I write this stuff out, what do I do with it? Nothing. It's catharsis. It's the action of you becoming more self-aware. Believe it or not dissimilar from a spouse or a friend, when your brain starts to believe that you're actually listening to it, it'll calm right down. It'll calm right down. The reason you have digestion in head, and I'm saying all kinds of horrible crap to myself. By the way, if you're writing stuff down today, write this down. Do you know you speak to yourself in a way that you would never let anybody else speak to you? You are mean to yourself. You are horrible to yourself in the dialogue of your own head. And I know you know that's true. I don't need a show of hands. You know it's true. So this exercise helps cathartically get that stuff out, so your brain isn't trying to get your attention with it all the time. And the more you cathartically get it out, the more your brain relaxes. The more your brain relaxes, the more into high performance mentality you can get. And yes, for what it's worth, if you're wondering, this was a major exercise with every major athlete I've ever worked with. So in lieu of time, I'm just going to put this in closing. I hope it's okay, Roger. Guys, yeah. This is my direct contact information. That's my cell phone. That's my direct email. It doesn't go to my assistant. It doesn't go to any. It comes directly to me. If you have questions, hit me up. Email or text is fine. I like to serve people. I'm in this world to help. I didn't ask Roger permission. I do hope it's okay, Roger.
Yes, absolutely.
I just want to serve your community.
We were going to, and we greatly appreciate that. We were going to certainly share that. And as I was saying to in the answer to somebody's question, you will be receiving an email with everything in it, with Brian's contact information as well. There was one question here. Somebody asked what was Amanada was asking what was 3? What was 3? Maybe number 3. Were you counting off things?
I believe that was review direction. Is that what? Because that would be that would be, number 3 was imagine your outcome. Yes. You know what? I'm glad you asked that, because I think I've glazed over it so quickly in lieu of time. Let me frame it this way for you. There are blind spots in all of our day. What I mean by that is there are small pockets of time where we don't have to think. In the shower, you just rotely go through the process. You don't think it through. When you drive, I know it sounds horrible, but it's true. We drive in a very unconscious way. You're not thinking about the route, or you know where you're going, you just drive. My suggestion is, in those pockets of time where you have unconscious process take over, consciously imagine what it is you want. Take those small windows of time to slip into an imagination of affirmative glory, you accomplishing whatever you want. And for what it's worth, the shower every morning and every time I drive anywhere. Pursuant to the bio, Roger, you read, my intention is to win the World Championships of Powerlifting in 2027. I can tell you and your tribe here, I've already won it probably about 10,000 times in my imagination. So come 2027, I just intend to do what my brain has already seen me do 10,000 times. That's the point. I don't have any worry or fear or anxiety about will I win worlds. Of course I will. I already have a million times in my brain. That's what I want you to consider. What is it you want in your life? Start to imagine it richly on a regular basis.
Fantastic. Wonderful. So yes, we always encourage folks to connect with our speakers, and shout out to Brian Bulger here for making the introduction, and the introduction also from Eddie McGuire, who is on the call. Thank you very much, Eddie, for being part of bringing us great speaker talent. So Elise, if you are ready, you can take us out, and we will say our goodbyes. And thank you all so much for being part of the HR Roundtable. And we will see you soon for another great presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you all so sincerely. Connect as you will. Thanks, Roger. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Brian. Good to see you.